Hello everyone, welcome to Sinister Prime. Since many of you listen to these stories to relax and drift off into dreams, I thought it would be wonderful to hear where you're tuning in from around the world. Let's begin the story. It was the kind of place you'd expect to find peace in, an old Victorian-style house in the quieter part of town, tucked away from the city noise. I'd just started my new job at a nearby office, and moving into the old house seemed like the perfect solution. I wasn't looking for anything fancy. The rent was cheap, and the neighborhood was clean. I guess I wasn't as picky as I should have been back then. My new roommate was Eliza. I found her through an online ad. A few friendly messages exchanged, and the next thing I knew, I was signing the lease. She seemed normal enough when I met her, a tall, willowy woman with a sharp, angular face. Her black hair was slicked back in a severe ponytail, and her eyes were what struck me the most. Too wide, too bright. They glinted in the light like glass. I chalked it up to nervous energy. She was shy, a little odd, but harmless. Or so I thought. The first few weeks were fine. For the most part. Eliza kept to herself, mostly staying in her room or disappearing for hours at a time. She worked at a local art gallery, she told me once, though I never actually saw her leave for work. The door to her room, at the end of the long, narrow hallway, was always closed, and I didn't mind. I liked my privacy, too. It was small things at first. Little things that I ignored. I'd find the kitchen window open when I knew I'd closed it. The fridge door ajar in the morning. I'd hear footsteps in the middle of the night, heavy ones, as if someone was pacing back and forth in the hallway. But Eliza's bedroom door always remained shut. I tried asking her about it once, half-jokingly, trying to ease the tension that had begun to settle over the house. But she just smiled. A thin-lipped, humorless smile, and said,
"I'm a night owl."
I started sleeping with my door locked after that. About a month in, I began to notice a smell. Faint at first, but persistent, like something rotting, festering. I checked the fridge, the trash bins, nothing. It seemed to come from Eliza's room. I mentioned it to her once in passing, but she brushed me off.
"Just some old art supplies,"
she said, waving her hand like it was no big deal. I didn't press her. It wasn't worth the confrontation. One night, I woke to the sound of scratching. At first, I thought it was coming from outside, a stray cat, or maybe rats in the walls. But as I lay there, heart pounding, I realized the sound was coming from inside the house. It was soft, deliberate, like fingernails dragging across wood. I held my breath, straining to hear, but the sound stopped as suddenly as it had started. I lay there in the dark, eyes wide open, unable to shake the feeling that something, was watching me. The next morning I found deep gouges in the wooden floor outside my bedroom door, 4 long parallel lines, as if someone had raked their nails across the floor in a frenzy. I confronted Eliza about it, but she just looked at me with those wide, glassy eyes and said,
"You must have done it in your sleep."
Her voice was flat, emotionless. I didn't believe her. The smell in the house grew worse, thick, putrid, almost unbearable. I couldn't take it anymore. One night, after Eliza had retreated to her room, I decided to investigate. The smell was strongest near her door, so I crouched down, pressing my ear to the wood. Nothing, no footsteps, no shuffling, just silence. But the smell, God, the smell. I reached for the doorknob, hesitating for a moment, before turning it slowly, praying she wouldn't hear. The door creaked open just a crack, and I was immediately hit with a wave of stench so overpowering, I gagged. The room was pitch black, but I could make out shapes in the gloom. Furniture, maybe a desk, something hanging from the ceiling. My hand fumbled for the light switch, my fingers trembling as they found it. I flicked it on, and that's when I saw it. Her room was filled with dozens of small glass jars, each one stuffed with something grotesque. Clumps of matted hair, fingernails, bones. They were arranged on shelves, the floor, even the windowsill, all carefully labeled in neat handwriting. My heart raced, panic seizing my chest as I took a step back, stumbling into something soft. I turned around, and that's when I saw her. Eliza stood in the corner of the room, her face pale and gaunt, her eyes wild with a manic gleam. Her arms were outstretched, and hanging from her fingertips were long, sharp nails, dripping with something dark and wet. Her mouth twisted into a sick grin as she took a step toward me.
"You shouldn't have come in here,"
she hissed, her voice barely a whisper. I backed out of the room, my stomach churning with fear and revulsion. I ran to my room, locking the door behind me, my mind racing. What the hell had I just seen? Was this some kind of sick joke? I grabbed my phone, fingers shaking as I dialed the police, but my call wouldn't go through. No signal. The house was old. Maybe the thick walls were blocking the connection. Or maybe something was preventing me from leaving. The scratching started again. This time it was louder, more frantic. I backed away from the door, my breath coming in ragged gasps as the sound grew closer and closer. I could hear Eliza's footsteps now, slow and deliberate, as if she was dragging something behind her. My heart pounded in my ears as I realized she was coming for me. I ran to the window, yanking it open and throwing myself out onto the roof. The cold night air hit me like a slap, but I didn't care. I scrambled down the drain pipe, nearly slipping in my panic, and landed hard on the ground. I didn't stop running until I was several blocks away, my lungs burning and my legs trembling. I never went back to that house. I never even tried to collect my things. I just left. Moved in with a friend, changed my number, blocked Eliza on every social media platform I could think of. For weeks, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face. Those wide, glassy eyes, that twisted grin, the nails, sharp and dripping. I couldn't get the image out of my head. I tried to forget. I told myself it was just a nightmare, that I'd imagined it all. But deep down, I knew the truth. Something about that house wasn't right. Something about Eliza wasn't human. A few months later, I saw a news report on TV. The house had been condemned, torn down after the new tenants complained of strange smells and noises. During the demolition, workers found something buried beneath the floorboards, a collection of bones, human bones, carefully arranged in the same way Eliza had arranged those jars. The police never found her. She vanished without a trace, leaving behind nothing but that sickening smell. I still think about her sometimes, late at night when the house is quiet and I'm lying in bed. I think about those footsteps, that scratching, and I wonder if she's still out there, waiting for her next roommate.